Hello, Stephen.
Oh, g'day, Dean.
Welcome. I was just doing an introduction for the background and what we have asked you to do. Are you ready to do a presentation?
Yes, I am. I'll just share my screen, but feel free to keep talking while I do that.
Yep. Well, I'll just repeat what I said. Very simply, I've asked you to examine a certain physical area, in relation to into Sydney, using data to help us understand a bit more about our recruitment, the communities from which we do our recruitment for Kairos. So over to you.
Thank you, Vern. I trust that I can be heard well enough, coming through loud and clear, hopefully. If not, I'm sure you'll let me know. But good afternoon, and for those who may have missed last night's session, my name is Reid, and I'm a researcher with the Christian Research Association. Thank you again for the invitation to join you online. What I've been asked to do this afternoon is to show you briefly how data and how research in general can be used to assist in understanding your local context. In this instance, my intention is to demonstrate the value of quality data analysis as an example of how it might be valuable in the recruitment of volunteers to Kairos Prison Ministry programs. Of course, my challenge is to provide as much information in a short space of time, so apologies in advance if I leave something out that you think should be in, or if I put something in that you think I should have left out. But before I do that, I'd like to just take one step back and just point out why I consider research important for churches and for Christian ministries more broadly. After 15 years in Christian research, I can honestly say that most churches and church organisations have struggled with valuing good research, or any research at all very often. It seems in most other industries in Australia, whether it's the corporate world, in health, in retail, in politics, research is pertinent. Indeed, in our daily life even, we do research. We seek out data before making decisions very often. And how much more important is Christian ministry than many other things we do in life? So why do I consider it important? I like the explanation of one practical theologian who puts it like this. He says, combining the foundations and aims of Christian faith with empirical insight can help the church to promote realistic perspectives and better praxis in accordance with basic theological values. So simply put it on the blackboard, it's Christian faith plus empirical insight, that is the research, equals realistic perspectives and better praxis. And I think that's what we in any ministry should be aiming to do. We need to start from a realistic perspective of the context we are entrusted with. But enough of that justification of why my role exists, and on to some examples. The remaining slides that I'm going to show provide an example of a process to understand your demographic context. In this example, within a certain geographical area of Greater Sydney. For the most part, I'm using data from the 2021 census. And in this instance, the area I'm looking at covers 23 local government areas, ranging from Mossman, Waverley, Randwick to the east, Liverpool and Georges River to the south, Penrith to the west, Blacktown, Parramatta and Reid to the north. Or if you'd like to see it as a map, there it is. If you've got, for those of you who know a little bit about Sydney area. By the way, this is just one example of one geography classification that can be used in this process. We now have access to any area you might imagine, such as a town, a suburb, postcode, rural or region areas, etc. Right down to your local neighbourhood of a couple of hundred households. Now, within the selected local government areas of Greater Sydney, more than 3.4 million people live within that area. Around half of them were born in Australia, while almost 45% were born overseas. In comparison, just over 2/3 of the national population were born here in Australia, while almost 28% were born overseas. Proportionally, the Christian population in this Sydney area is similar to that of Australia overall. 1 in 5, or just over 1 in 5 people identify with a non-Christian religion in this area, compared with 1 in 10 Australians. And primarily because of that, there are fewer people who do not identify with any religious group, just 28%, compared to almost 4 in 10 Australians. If you prefer, once again, data presented visually, this is the breakdown of religion in those selected Sydney local government areas, or LGAs. However, remember, within any area, there is much religious diversity. So, for example, in Hunters Hill, just northeast of Sydney on the Parramatta River, 58% of the population are Christian. But in Sydney itself, in the inner city, just under 28% are Christian. In Cumberland, south of Parramatta, just over 2 in 5 residents identify with a non-Christian religion. In Mossman, what many would consider one of the most well-to-do areas of Greater Sydney, just 4% of people identify with a non-Christian religion. Of course, to drill down a bit deeper, there are many different Christian denominations represented in the area, as this bar chart shows. So by far the largest group are the Catholics, with almost 800,000 people identifying. Next to the Anglicans, with around 216,000 people, and the Eastern Orthodox, with around 146,000 people. Now, understanding the breakdown of denominations like this, I think it's important to get a sense of how it might impact your recruitment strategies in a particular area. I would guess, being involved with other ministries myself, I would guess that people from some denominations are more involved with Kairos than those from other denominations. An important aspect of religiosity is related to ethnicity. I mentioned earlier that only around half of the population in this area are Australian born, as this bar chart shows the top 5 birthplaces. The next most common country of birth was China, followed by India, Vietnam, and England. For the Christian population, 59% were Australian born. 4.5% of Christians were born in the Philippines. The vast majority of them, I would guess, would be Catholic. But there's also high numbers of Iraqi-born Christians in the area, as well as those born in England and in Lebanon. Again, thinking about recruitment strategies, are they different depending on the ethnic makeup of the Christians in an area? I think that's vitally important. Importantly also is knowing the age profile of Christians in an area that you want to minister within. This graph on your screen shows the age and sex profile of the overall population in the Sydney local government areas that we've selected. Now, each horizontal bar represents a different age group, with the number of males on the left, the darker band, and the number of females on the right, that is the lighter band. As you can see, it's shaped a bit like a Christmas tree, you might say. The largest age groups are those in their 20s and in their 30s, as you can see, but there's much less in the older age groups, particularly those aged 70 or older. And the number of males and females in that graph is almost identical. When we look at a similar chart for Christians in the area, we can see quite a different image. While it is a much more balanced graph overall, the largest age groups are those in the late 40s and 50s. But if you can see that clearly, you may also notice a slight imbalance towards the right side, with more females than males. Of course, not all people who identify with a Christian denomination attend church services regularly. We know there are large proportions of Christians who only attend worship services perhaps at Christmas time or at Easter, and many do not attend at all. The National Church Life Survey recently revealed that just over 1 in 5 Australians of any religion attend religious services at least monthly. My own analysis of data from the Australian Survey of Social Attitudes, AUSA, found that around 28% of Christians attend church services monthly or more often. We also know that generally church attenders are much older than the overall population, and that around 3 in 5 attenders are females. That means 2 in 5 are males. This is a graph prepared using data from the National Church Life Survey and the Australian census, and shows the age profile of church attenders compared with the Australian population of those aged 15 and over in both lines. Now, if you're quick with your calculations, you'll note that around 54% of church attenders are aged 60 or older, 54%. In comparison, 28% of all Australians aged 15 and over are in this age group. In contrast, at the other end of the scale to your left, just 10% of attenders are aged under 29 years, compared to 23% of all Australians. In relation to the breakdown by sex, females make up around 61% of all attenders and males around 39% of all attenders. That's the pie chart on the left. The Australian population, as you can see, is almost half-half split down the middle. Now, if you're like me, or perhaps you're not, you'll find this all highly fascinating. Love the data. But on the other hand, you may be wondering, well, how is this relevant to Kairos, and what does it mean for future recruitment of volunteers? Well, before I sort of get to the end of this little presentation, let's just go through a very quick exercise to see how this might apply. Starting from an example question. Realistically, for instance, how many females might be potential Kairos recruits or volunteers in this Sydney area that we've selected? Well, I've used the data that I've presented in the previous slides and my own calculations that we have from other data sources to see the numbers we may have to work with as a preliminary starting point. There are 1.4 million Christians in that selected Sydney LGAs, and we know 775,000 of them are female. We estimate that around 411,000 of those will be attending services monthly or more often. Now, of those who do attend, 251,000 are female. However, if we look at the age profile, we can see around 41,600 of those females are aged under 20. I don't expect that they would be the recruits that you'd be looking for, perhaps a little bit younger. 92,800 roughly are aged between 20 and 59, and there's 116,500 who are aged 60 and over. And as I put on the slide there, almost 78,000 of those are aged over or 70 and over. Another aspect that I haven't looked at here is the educational levels. Now, we know that overall, church attenders are more highly educated than the general population. That's another thing to think about in terms of recruitment as well. Of course, you will know what you're looking at for in terms of new volunteers. I can't paint that picture for you. Thinking about the age profile, though, in the past, older people, that is, those in their late career stage or in retirement, they may have been the ones seen to have more time to commit to volunteering or ministries of the church. But is that still the case? What does the latest evidence suggest? We know that older people are much more mobile nowadays. Many have the means to travel much more than previous generations. On the other hand, many older people are now much more involved with grandparent duties, for instance, than in the past. So this all brings me to just a few questions for you to reflect on as a group. If you use data as a starting point, firstly, how is a demographic picture of a particular area different to that of your current volunteers? Secondly, who do you need to recruit in the future? And thirdly, what recruitment practices may need to change to those of the past? Now, sorry, but I don't have the answers to those questions, but I do believe it's important in answering those questions to utilise all the information you have at your disposal to assist you in gaining a realistic perspective and doing better practice in prison ministry. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Stephen, for that. What I've mentioned earlier, Stephen, that what we're doing here right now is illustrating the potential use of data, and you've spelt that out quite well for us. Are there any questions that you would like to address to Stephen on what we've got? I'll give you an opportunity if you have any questions, more generally or specifically about what he said. There's one question here, Bruce. Wait for the microphone.
Quite a few churches in the country have members come up to 200k for fellowship, and they'll be in completely different postcodes, but they may like to work and have an affinity with that people in the main postcode, as we could call them, and they would be keen to go on a Kairos or some other Christian venture. So how do you accommodate that?
Stephen, just let me help you out a bit there. Before you came on, I had a short conversation about the use of postcodes to define a geographical area, like a catchment area for a region. So I know we haven't asked you to do anything with postcodes at this stage, but would you like to elaborate on how postcodes can relate to census data? Just to help fill that out, I didn't go into that territory, but the subject is about the questions about postcodes, but the relationship between postcode data and census data.
Just a quick overview of geography when we're talking about the census data. You can really get information on really any geographical area that you desire. Really, the sky's the limit, as it is with the census data itself. You can get as much detail as you like. It's a little bit trickier, obviously. You can paint a picture of a particular community using a postcode, but of course, that won't necessarily tell you, the people that are involved in a particular church, for instance, or a ministry, because often, particularly in this day and age, people are much more mobile and travel further distances because they have cars or they can travel fairly easily. So, of course, that's not going to capture exactly what you're after, but it would be certainly a good starting point. We know from data that we have that people travel outside of their general area to attend worship services, attend work, attend recreation activities and so forth, much more so than a couple of decades ago as well. But certainly census data can provide a picture for you in terms of the people within a particular area. You can map that against the types of people within an area, for instance, where a prison is located to compare areas. If you've got information in a database of your own volunteers, there's nothing to stop you from mapping that against census data to say, wow, look at this data, we have X proportion of our volunteers that travel 50 kilometres or more, to be involved with our programs. That tells you something about the volunteers, and then you can obviously use that data to target your ministry and your recruitment of volunteers. Does that sort of answer your question, or at least...
That might have answered your question, Jeff, fully. No, but yours is a bit more specific, I think, than we're trying to get across here today. Yeah. But I'm happy to have a chat with you later and see if I fully understand that. Yeah, we have another question. Yeah, Rob?
Thanks for that. I'm interested actually in schools and things. Actually, we talk about churches. We have a lot in our area. We have a lot of Christian schools and things. I don't think we've ever discussed in our meetings about tapping into those, into their newsletters and things for recruitment. And I think there'll be a lot of parents could be very interested in it. And the other thing, actually, the concept about schools is I don't think we've ever had a discussion about running a Kairos course through school holiday time, specifically for that reason of tapping into teachers who would make great Kairos, young great Kairos people. And if we think about even running courses at that time, we haven't done that. And so they're just two comments.
Yeah. Thanks. My comment, back that, is really that's more to do with the efficiency question down at the region level, rather than what we're trying to do here today, which is the effectiveness in identifying. But the point's still, I take it. Sorry, I won't ask you to comment on that one, specifically, Stephen. Is there any more? Oh, yes, there's one up the front here, Bruce.
Thanks, Stephen. Is there any data on the propensity of different age groups or genders to volunteer and where they're spending their volunteering time?
Yeah, good question. Yes, indeed there is. Certainly through the census data, there's a question about volunteering, about caring for other people with a disability. Also, organisations like Volunteering Australia, they had some research about 12 months ago that provided that specifically looked at volunteering during and after the pandemic, so through COVID. They haven't, as far as I know, they haven't updated that research yet, but certainly I'd be interested to see that. But coming out of that research was people have been a bit slow to get back to their volunteering as they did prior to the pandemic. Basically, people aren't volunteering as much as prior to COVID-19. And I think that's true with many of the ministries, Christian ministries that are out there, and obviously church attendance as well. There's some evidence that suggests, during COVID, church attendance fell away by at least 30% in many denominations. The big question, of course, is how, how can we get those figures to bounce back to pre-COVID levels? But certainly I'd be more than happy to look at a specific area and pull out some volunteering data and see what it paints for you.
No more. Okay, Stephen, thank you very much. You fulfilled your charter, and we thank you for the time and effort that you put into that. So thank you very much.